My husband and I had been saving for a long time to buy a large private house. We wanted to start a big family, and finally, the long-awaited moment arrived. We collected the necessary amount of money and started looking for builders to construct the house. I wanted to find a not too expensive but responsible team. We searched for a long time, as it was hard to trust just anyone, especially since it was so difficult for us to save this money. Out of all the candidate builders, we trusted Jason the most. He offered the most reasonable price and promised to do everything conscientiously. We agreed to meet on our purchase plot to take measurements and calculate the estimate in detail. When we met Jason, it turned out he was a citizen of another country. This alarmed us. It was scary to give such a large amount of money, knowing that the person could easily leave with it to their country, where we wouldn't be able to find him. But Jason quickly dispelled our fears. We saw how responsibly he took measurements and proposed good construction solutions. When he made the complete plan, my husband and I were very happy. It was pleasant to realize that we would have such a house. The cost was even lower than expected. Jason assured us that his name was very important to him and that he would personally control everything. We signed a contract with a smile and gave 80% of the money. The next meeting was scheduled for a month and a half later, when the house's foundation would be ready. During this time, Jason sent us photo reports of each stage. Finally, the foundation was ready. We went to see the completed work. On the way, we were in a great mood, happy that an important part of the construction was finished. On site, we were warmly greeted by Jason. After a brief chat, we went to see the completed work. Approaching the foundation, what I saw upset me. For the past month and a half, we had been watching videos on how to correctly build a foundation, but what we saw on our construction site was very different. The foundation was uneven, there were footprints everywhere, and a couple of deep cracks immediately caught the eye.
"So, how do you like the work?"
Jason asked proudly.
"Such a foundation will last for centuries. Honestly, we are not satisfied,"
said my husband. Jason looked at us in surprise.
"Well, just look,"
my husband said, pointing to the flaws.
"What is this?"
Jason smiled.
"I understand your concerns, but believe me, they are unfounded. About the footprints, this often happens on construction sites. They do not affect the quality of the foundation, and they won't be visible. Yes, it's not good that they appeared, but it's a natural process. The ground settles, but we will definitely fix all these aesthetic issues,"
Jason said, and his words reassured us. I even felt a bit ashamed in front of him.
"Well, since we have settled everything, tomorrow we proceed to the next stage. We will start building the walls,"
Jason said, and hearing this, our mood lifted again. Back home, we started watching videos about the foundation again. Intuitively, we felt that something was wrong, but at the same time, we understood that we could be mistaken, or we just wanted to believe it. All week, Jason sent photographs where everything looked great. On the weekend, we planned to visit the builders, but this time, to our surprise, Jason discouraged us from coming, saying it would be better to see the finished version, not the intermediate one. But this did not suit us. We wanted to come periodically and see how our nest was being built, and on the weekend, we still went to our house. Arriving at the place, Jason met us again. He seemed worried, but his friendliness was as usual at a high level. Approaching the house, we were pleasantly surprised. Everything was excellent. We even praised Jason. He happily replied that the client's smile was the most important thing for him. Then Jason suggested we take a walk and discuss further construction, so as not to disturb the workers. After a brief conversation, we happily went back. Returning to work was unpleasant. We were eager to move into our house and quit this job. All the following week, Jason sent us photographs. By the weekend, we were so tired that we decided to rest and not check the construction that week. Jason sent photos showing that the builders had already started constructing the stove. We were overjoyed. I really wanted to cook something in it. Another week passed, and my husband and I went to our new house with a cake, wanting to please the builders and surprise them, while also checking the new stage of construction. When we arrived, Jason came out to meet us immediately. He seemed distracted and said it was better to warn in advance about our visit. This confused us because we had the right to come whenever we wanted. I showed Jason the cake and kindly said we didn't come empty-handed. He thanked us and said that we couldn't enter the house right now. We didn't like this. When my husband asked why, Jason pointed to the entrance door. It was blocked by construction barriers.
That's why I said you should have warned us. We would have done construction work on the other side today, and there would be an opportunity to enter.
Jason explained. Everything sounded logical. We gave the cake to Jason so they could have tea with the workers, and he thanked us.
So, see you next weekend then,
Jason said. Then he shook our hands, and we left. Just a couple of days later, Jason sent photos of the finished roof and stove. The construction was going too fast. We started to worry again. What if they were doing everything poorly? The next day, I received a call from our neighbor, an elderly woman in her 70s. Her call scared me. What if something happened? I answered. The neighbor began to shout.
Who did you hire? They constantly drink and have barbecues. Have you seen the house from the other side? No,
I replied, and at that moment, I felt like a fool. Jason always led us away and distracted us. We really hadn't looked at the house from the other side.
So, you know, the house from my side looks just awful. If you don't stop these pointless gatherings of your incompetent workers, I will call the police.
Hearing this, I was horrified. I even burst into tears. I had recently found out that I was pregnant, and it was painful to hear that something was wrong with our house. Hearing my tears, the neighbor began to comfort me. I told her I was pregnant and wouldn't survive if they did a poor job. The neighbor asked me to calm down, said she wouldn't call the police, and suggested we surprise the workers with an unexpected inspection the next evening and catch them off guard. I agreed and immediately told my husband everything. He was furious. We slept very poorly. After a working day, we went to the house. When we arrived, Jason met us. He was drunk, but greeted us as always warmly. My husband was angry, and Jason said,
Guys, it's my birthday today. Sorry, but we decided to have a small party today, especially since we are ahead of the construction schedule. If you want, you can join our celebration,
Jason said. His invitation stunned me. It looked like he was trying to distract us and create a good impression. I looked at him sternly and said,
You know, Jason, neighbors are complaining about you. They say you have parties here every day. We want to check your work right now.
Suddenly, Jason's face changed. We walked around the house and were horrified. Only the front side looked good, and the other sides were terrible. The logs were laid poorly and were sticking out, and there were large gaps. It looked unreliable. We started to complain. Jason began to calm us down again, saying that it was part of the construction process and everything would settle down, but this was hard to believe. Once again, he wanted to distract us and disappear after getting our signature and the rest of the money. Then we went inside the house, and what we saw upset us even more. There was garbage everywhere, and the stove was also cracked. Everywhere we looked, there were flaws. We started arguing with Jason and demanded our money back, but he kept asking us not to make hasty conclusions, but it was clear that we were being scammed. When Jason realized that distracting us was useless, he changed his face again and started arguing too. His rotten nature was immediately revealed. We decided that it was pointless to argue, and my husband started calling the police. Jason got scared and said he would return 60% of the money the next day, but they deserved to keep 20%. We agreed and went home. All the way, we analyzed what they were trying to achieve with such work. My husband confidently said that they wanted to cover all the gaps before our next visit, making it look like everything was fine, but the house would collapse in a couple of days. This stress even made my stomach ache, and I shouldn't worry because I was expecting a child. The next day we arrived for the money, but the workers were gone, along with the money. They left a note saying we would regret what we did. We called the police. To our great joy, the road workers were quickly found. At the trial, Jason was smirking. Their threats were driving me crazy. I was afraid that when they were released, they would come and do something terrible. Unfortunately, the money was not found during the arrest. They never revealed to the police where they hid it. We started looking for workers who could fix everything. Few wanted to take on such a job, but one good company agreed for a large sum of money. This suited us. The only downside was that we would have to live without furniture, as there wasn't enough money for it. We agreed that the workers could stay in the house while they did the work, and we hoped everything would be fine this time. But after a couple of days, my husband called the workers, and they didn't answer. This scared us again. We decided to go and check everything. Arriving at the place, we saw no one. The windows were covered with plastic to keep the cold out. We couldn't see anything through it, so we went inside.
Is anyone here?
But there was no response. When we went into the living room, we were horrified. All the workers were lying without signs of life, surrounded by empty bottles of alcohol. We were scared and ran out of the house, calling the police. The investigation found that the new team had suffocated from carbon monoxide. Someone had blocked the chimney with foreign objects to prevent the gas from escaping. All the evidence pointed to Jason's team. They built the stove and wanted to harm us, threatening us, so their sentence was extended to life imprisonment. Every day I cried. I was so stressed that my stomach hurt badly. The doctor forbade me to worry, but how could I not in such a situation? Our dream had turned into an unfinished house where 5 people had died. Despite the investigation's results, there were still strange aspects. How did a team of 5 men not notice that the stove was emitting carbon monoxide? It might be missed in the city with a stove burner left on, but here, the smoke was 100% coming back inside. It's impossible not to notice this even when very drunk. It seemed like some kind of mystery. The only thing that comforted me was that Jason and his team would never get out of prison and could not harm us. My thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. It was the neighbor.
How are you?
The old lady asked. I told her everything.
Well, the land unfortunately did not accept you.
She said.
Yes, it's very sad. Don't be upset, dear. You are still young. Everything will work out for you.
She tried to comfort me.
I don't think we'll be able to save such a large amount of money again. We barely saved enough for the house together. And now I won't be able to work because of the baby. And the expenses will grow.
I was sad.
Don't worry. God will help you. I will pray for you. Now it must be scary to stay in your house. After all, 5 people died there. These spirits are definitely attached to your house now. You won't believe it, but yesterday evening, when I passed your house, I saw a translucent figure. It looked angry and dissatisfied.
Her words made my hair stand on end.
I was wondering where the spirits in our new house came from, so I decided to call you. Now everything is clear. Well, don't worry, everything will work out for you.
I thanked the old lady and hung up. Her words made me so scared that I lost the desire to go there. When my husband came home, I told him everything. He laughed, saying the old lady was out of her mind, but it didn't seem that way to me. She told everything so confidently and coherently. A couple of weeks later, my husband finally convinced me to go to our house for the weekend. All the way there, I was anxious, but I tried to keep myself together for the sake of the baby and our dream. Maybe we could still fix everything. When we arrived, we immediately started cleaning, and by the evening, the house was quite clean. I even felt calm being there. Maybe all was not lost yet. The only downside was the chill from the gas. The house needed major repairs. In the evening, we discussed when the second company would return our money. After talking, we started to feel sleepy, and due to the cold air, we quickly fell asleep. In the middle of the night, there was a howl in the living room. I jumped up immediately.
Did you hear that?
Yes. my husband replied. Then we heard knocking from the living room. Anxiety made my stomach ache again. My husband picked me up and carried me outside, then put me in the car, and we drove away at full speed. The pain in my stomach didn't go away but only got worse. We went to the hospital. The doctors immediately put me on IVs to save the baby. There was a risk of losing it. I was discharged only a week later, with strict instructions not to worry, but it was difficult. Thoughts about what had happened kept invading my mind, remembering the old lady's story about the ghost. A few days later, the neighbor called again.
Hello, dear. How are you feeling? About 10 days ago, I saw you leaving your house in a hurry through my window at night. I wanted to call that day, but I ran out of money on my phone and had to go to town to refill it.
I told her everything again. The old lady sympathized with me.
Well, dear, what can I say? Since the land doesn't accept you, I can make you an offer. I can buy your plot. Why do you need it?
I asked logically.
Well, I would extend my garden. What else can I do? I am a lonely grandmother. It would be less boring with a larger garden. I have some savings and hope to help you a little with them.
The old lady replied.
Are you afraid of the spirits on our plot? No, I'm not going into the house, and I don't think they will harm an old lady. I need to think. I said, and we ended the conversation.
After discussing it with my husband, we decided to sell the plot and house to the old lady for half the price. Plus, the company returned the money. We decided to save it for the child's education. 4 years passed. We often felt sad in the evenings that our dream didn't come true, but overall we were happy. Our daughter brought us great joy. One day, the old lady called me.
Hello, dear.
She whispered. Her voice made me anxious.
How are you?
She whispered. Her voice made me anxious.
How are you?
I told her we were doing well and asked why her voice was like that.
I am dying, dear. I have cancer. Can you fulfill my last wish?
I tensed up, worrying that she wanted us to take care of the funeral because she had no relatives, or worse, wanted us to take her in and look after her until she died. I didn't like any of these options, as we had almost no free time. My silence dragged on, and the old lady continued.
I know you have little time, but I have almost none left, so I'll get straight to the point. Come to my house alone tomorrow. I have something very important to tell you. Please don't refuse an old lady.
I felt very sorry for the dying woman. I agreed. The next day, my husband took a day off to stay with our daughter, and I went to the old lady's house. Seeing our old house gave me the chills. I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I immediately started to worry that she was dead. I opened the door, and the unpleasant smell of old age and medicine hit my nose.
I'm here. Where are you?
But no one answered. I walked around the house, looking into different rooms, searching for the old lady. Maybe she lost her voice and couldn't answer, but she was nowhere to be found, even on the second floor. Returning to the first floor, I saw a folder and 2 notes on the table. I took the note addressed to me and began to read.
Hello, dear. I want to tell you a story. I am a rather cold-blooded person, though I can pretend to be different. In reality, throughout my long life, I have done almost nothing good for others. You know, I always dreamed of having a huge plot, and you fulfilled my dream when you sold me your plot for half the price, and for that, I am grateful to you. Initially, I was very angry when you started building the house and got incompetent builders. I was even happy inside because I wanted that land but didn't have enough money. Then you hired another team. I made pastries for them, adding sleeping pills. When they fell asleep, I brought in empty bottles of alcohol and scattered them around the living room, then climbed onto the roof and blocked the chimney, lit the stove, and left. The smoke poured inside. I knew for sure that our local police wouldn't investigate deeply and would blame your first builders, thinking they blocked the stove before leaving. And that's what happened. Those builders were sentenced to life in prison, and that's also my fault. When you arrived, you were scared. I hid under the house and made scary noises to make you sell the land to me. I understand your hatred towards me and already hate myself. The fact is, every night I dream of the dead workers and they torment me. I am very afraid of going to hell if it exists. So I want to do something good for once. On the table is a folder with documents. I have already signed them, and you just need to sign them. I leave you my house and your former plot. Please don't look for me. I went to a hospice to live out my days. The doctor said I have less than a week left. On the table, another note with my confession for the police. Take it to them in a month when I am definitely dead. Then the builders will be released, and I will be beyond any punishment. But at least before God, I will have cleansed my soul and might get into heaven. Forgive me for everything.
Reading this, I was in shock. I sat in a chair, thinking. Hatred filled me. This woman and those builders were responsible for my daughter being born prematurely. My husband and I almost lost our minds back then. We could have lost the most precious thing we had, not to mention how we dreamed of raising her in that house. Because of them, I spent my entire pregnancy in anxiety, and this vile old woman smiled in my face. How can people act like this? At that moment, I was furious. I wanted to find the hospice and strangle her with my own hands, beating death to it, but I calmed down. I signed the documents. The property was now ours. We would rebuild everything and fulfill our dream. Moreover, over the past 4 years, my husband had made a friend, a builder named Robert, who promised to do everything perfectly. He even mentioned performing some rituals to cleanse the house of negative energy, something related to esotericism. I don't really believe in that, but it won't hurt. Calmly, I lit the fireplace and coldly threw the notes, mine and the one for the police, into the flames. They burned instantly. If there is a hell, I hope she ends up there, and as for Jason and his workers, let them rot in prison.